and then she stepped on the ball.
Recording in progress.
I don't think they caught that one, Pete.
That's okay.
And then she stepped on the ball.
Right.
Right. So I welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast, where we fail to stay on point typically, and will no doubt do so today. Uh, Probably have less people watching live since it's the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday, but more people watching
Wait,
later.
what?
Yeah, it's Tuesday afternoon. Uh, but if you are watching live, let me know that you can see us and hear us okay, all right? And I think they can. So turn up the volume here. Anyway, looks good. Alan Smalling says, "Thank you, Alan." All right, so I'm Mike Davis. I'm here with Curtis M. Lawson. Hey, Curtis.
Hello.
And Pete Rollick, who's playing a
Well,
hooky for an hour or so to do this.
shh, don't tell people. Would you just stop saying things like that?
Well, yeah, and well, everyone that's watching, they're watching at work, hoping their boss doesn't see it, right?
Yeah.
It's at least that's what I'm envisioning. So,
It's like a collective hooky.
Yes.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I'm the one working here because I'm doing the podcast. Doesn't really feel like work though. Um, guys, one of the best things you can do for me, besides the Patreon, which I really appreciate, is to comment on the YouTube video and click the like button too. That's great. But the commenting, I'm told, also helps the algorithm. My son told me this, so he's always right about the technical stuff. He's not. He's over there. He's nodding. So, anyway, Pete,
What?
you want to introduce yourself?
Pete Rollick, writer, madman, um, recovering alcoholic. I used to drive a Hyundai.
You're recovering?
Well, today.
And Curtis, will you introduce yourself also?
Yeah, my name is Curtis M. Lawson. I'm an author of horror and weird fiction. I'm an editor at Weird House Press. I've done some stuff with tabletop RPGs, and I've recently started making music again for the first time in like a million years. Um,
Really? What
yeah.
kind of music do you create?
It's heavy. I don't. There's so like subgenres are so like people get so like weird about subgenres right now.
Yeah.
So I've been jokingly calling it black and death punk. We'll see.
Well, actually, that leads right into something I wanted to ask you. A quote, something
Uh-oh.
about a quote by you, something
Yeah.
about your work as um, now I can't find it, of course. Something about the edge of vaginal horror or something like that. I don't know what it was. Does that
Edge
ring a
of
bell?
vaginal horror.
The vaginal was definitely in there, and I read that and I was like, okay. Um, so no,
It could have been something I've said.
yeah.
I've said many things I regret. So.
Well, I'll find this direct quote
All
after we're
right.
done with the show, but I swear he said it. Um, yeah, in a good way, Alan says. So anyway, so you wear several different hats. In other words, going back to fiction.
Yep.
Um, let's talk about those. Pete's here, and
What?
you just edited his upcoming book. Uh, let's see, the Cthulhu Heresy and Other Lovecraftian Sins. Is that right?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. Edited that.
Um,
It's coming out from Weird House. The pre-order's up right now for the deluxe edition.
okay. So uh, let's talk about what you do for Weird House first.
Um,
That's a great press. I mean, I love
Thank you.
that. Yeah.
Pretty much I do anything Joe needs done that is within my my time restraints and my skill set. So I do the social media. I deal with a lot of the customer emails and stuff like that.
So
I
you've
was
seen my
dealing
annoying emails.
not if they're going directly to him.
Oh, that's true.
um,
Yeah.
so um, I was dealing with when we had open submissions. I was going through that for a bit, and I work as an editor. I have an imprint called Gallows Whisper that I do, but I've edited Pete's book, which is just under the General Weird House, and Joe and I have co-edited a couple anthologies together. Um, and then sometimes I'll ship stuff for him. I'll do conventions, whatever he needs, really.
Yeah.
Don't you
So,
hate the slush pile?
Yeah. Well, I told him to close. I was like, Joe, we can't. I'm reading the. I'm the only one reading this. We have like 500 submissions. You got to
I know
close submissions. Like we can't handle this right now. And he finally did. So.
the slush pile is just, it's why I eventually just had to move on to, I do like one book a year, but move on to books and in reality move on to podcasting too.
Right now,
The
we were
slush
talking a little
pile
bit
is,
before we
yeah,
recorded about the business side of this. For any aspiring authors or whatever, please read guidelines, because the amount of like stuff that comes into that submission thing where it's like,
yes,
oh,
sir.
this is like a romance fantasy, or like just stuff that doesn't fit the press at all. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I've
read
got, I've
guidelines.
got for a weird fiction, with a focus on cosmic horror little magazine, I got vampire stories, I got all kinds of stuff that you didn't even read. You haven't read one story in the magazine, have you?
Yeah.
The other thing, and this I'll expand on that, is that the editorial community is rather small, and if you waste an editor's time, they're gonna talk about it,
Yeah.
and they will tell other editors that you were problematic. Uh,
Reputation is everything. And
yeah,
here's
yeah.
another thing you don't want to do. We're here to talk about you, Curtis, but this is part of what you do. Um, do not send a story to, for example, Weird House Press and send it to another press at the same time.
Oh, double submitting.
Yeah, do
Mm,
not double submit. That's annoying because then I've read a story by someone. I'm like, this is pretty damn good. I think I might want this. Then I contact the writer and they're like, oh, that was just accepted at this other place. You know, do
uh,
you get that a lot, Curtis?
No, I haven't run into it too much. I've run into it like once or twice, but honestly, I just haven't been accepting much at all, because we Joe does this thing. The interesting thing about Weird House, which I've never seen any other press operate like this, is Joe has these relationships with all these writers, and like he'll go to Tim Kern and be like, Tim, you should write me a collection based on this idea, or you should, Josh, you should write this kind of book. And he kind of he has a good idea of writers' strengths and what they do, so he'll make suggestions a lot and almost like commission these books. So
Yeah.
we have these books coming in from people that he has relationships with already. Um, so there's just not a lot of room in the publishing schedule to accept much anyway
yeah, I think we've been talking about this book, well,
for a
my book,
while.
for 3 years, I think.
Yeah, something like that. I think we started talking about it at Necronomicon.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
yeah.
On top of that, Joe Maury is just a hell of a nice guy.
he is.
Yeah, he really is, and very generous in many ways.
Yeah.
So yeah. So how much of your time would you say, as I mean, your father and husband too, I assume.
Yeah.
Um, how much of your working life is devoted to Weird House as opposed to what's the percentage versus your writing life and the stories?
Um,
Because you've got a lot of work out there.
I do. So I used to be a couple of years ago. I was really good at managing my time, and that kind of fell apart a little bit. Um, and I haven't written as much over like the last year and a half or so, and I'm getting back to having some discipline with it. But I've been doing more of the kind of the back end stuff, the editing and the business stuff for Weird House. Um, and there are a few things that I've had written for a while that are going to be coming out. But yeah, it's more been the business side of stuff for like the last year and a half or so.
Well, I hope you know if when you have things coming out, you have pre-order links up there or order links. Um, always email me. I'll promote it.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, I like your
Mm.
work. Um, so you're getting back more into writing, and not that anyone could say you haven't been prolific because you have been. I don't know if this is a complete list I'm looking at, but Blackheart Boys Choir, which I read several years ago. Devil's Night. That's a short story collection set in Detroit. All right,
Yep.
I want to come back to that one for sure. It's a bad, 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 bad world. I like that. That's like another collection. The Devoured.
That's a novel.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry.
a
I got bad
bad
information
world's a
here.
novel.
Okay, The Devoured.
Yep. Oh, that was my first novel.
And I like this title a lot. Those Who Go Forth into the Empty Place of Gods.
That was a really fun book, and it's like my least. It's the one with the lowest reviews on Goodreads, because it's kind of a comedy. But
Yeah. All right, give them more reviews, guys. Assuming you've read the book, or after you read the book. And then I see The Envious Nothing, which I've delved into as well, which is pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with Hippocampus on that one. That was a really good experience, and yeah, I got some really flattering blurbs. Laird Barron gave me a blurb that was kind of surreal, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Where should a person start, do you think, with your work?
If
it was your preference,
If it always for me, it always goes back to Blackheart Boys Choir. I feel like as far as like my long form stuff, I feel that's the strongest long form piece I have, and it's the most personal thing I've written, but it's also really like it's hands down the darkest. So if you don't want something really grim, maybe maybe start elsewhere. But I think that encapsulates a lot of my strengths as a writer, and it was really personal. So I just put a lot of myself into it, and I feel like that kind of shines through.
What was talk about how personal it was and everything that you put of yourself into the book.
Sure. So Blackheart Boys Choir is about this kind of teenage misfit kid who his father was a composer and he'd killed himself, and his mother kind of blew through all their money, and he was this kind of rich kid who's now a poor kid, and he's weird and pretentious and will only wear suits. He only listens to classical music, and he finds this piece of music that his dad started to compose that he didn't finish, and basically there's this demon connected to it which will give him more of the music for increasingly sadistic acts of violence and such.
Mhm.
And the
That's how I
the
compose my music, by the way, just
yeah
getting that out there.
the I guess I call it emotionally autobiographical, and there are a few things in there that are legitimately like ripped from my childhood. A few of the, not the murder scenes, but some of the issues with his parents and stuff. And I had a really hard time with other kids in school. I didn't fit in. This was before you remember how you guys are around my age. It wasn't okay to be a nerd. Like, like it wasn't a cool thing. It wasn't okay to be like a punk or a metal guy. Like it was anything that was different, like you know.
Yeah.
So I had a really hard time in school. My parents were both into drugs and alcohol and partying, and I was really angry, like really angry kid. And
That's hard, man.
it
To have
is,
parents like that.
yeah, it was tough. And I got into black metal when I was a teenager, which at the time in the '90s, that was like what was going on in like Scandinavia. It was all this violence and people were burning churches and murdering people. And as like an angry 16-year-old man, I latched onto it. Like I was like, yeah, this is everything. And luckily, I was really into music. I was really into art, because I think a year after I graduated in '98, and Columbine happened in '99. And sometimes I just think, I'm like, was I like one or two bad days away from doing something really violent and destructive?
The Joker
Um,
thing.
yeah,
All it takes is one bad
one
day.
exactly. So, um, Blackheart Boys Choir is kind of an exploration of where I was in my teenage years and how things could have gone a bit more poorly, or a lot more poorly, I suppose.
Okay, let's get back to one important point. You were a teenager in the 90s?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think you're our age, man. You're young.
Okay.
I'm feeling old now.
I know,
I'm
right?
44.
He graduated in '98. I've been married 2 years by then.
All right.
I was in my third marriage, so
All right. I'm a little bit younger, I guess.
Yeah,
I
a little bit, but that's
third,
okay. Younger is
third.
good. Uh, it means that you're probably got,
Mhm.
if you're lucky, about the same number of years ahead of you as you do behind you. So
Hopefully.
yeah.
And
I mean, William Shatner's what, 91?
right?
I mean, imagine that. And he's still got control of his faculties. I know this is a sidebar, but he was born in 33, I think. And he lived through World War II as a, he grew up during World War II, the dark times of World War II, and all these decades, 40s, 50s, 60s,
Yeah, it's wild.
he's seen it all. It's just
Like, how
crazy.
old was he when he went to space?
Oh, it was just a
He
couple
was
years ago.
old.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
89 or
80s,
90.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In his 80s.
Well, he's
Uh,
91 now, and that just happened recently, a year or two
Uh,
ago. Talking about with the Amazon guy, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
I thought that
yeah,
was
yeah.
COVID though.
yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's a sidebar. Like I said, we failed to stay on point, which I think you said you watched this show, so you know.
Yeah.
uh,
The other thing about boys choir, I guess that would be
yes,
personal, is just music was always, especially when I was younger, was very important to me. So the storytelling, the way that the main character uses language because it's first person, he kind of sees everything through a musical lens and expresses everything in that way. And I think that I was able to do that well in a way that didn't kind of push aside people who maybe don't know music theory or aren't really into music, but they were still able to get the feeling of it. So I think that that is another thing that was kind of like essentially me that I put in there.
music is that thing that can make us all kind of feel the same in so many ways, you
Yep.
know. Um,
So
yeah,
that plays
Pete,
into couch surfing, right?
Yeah.
Because Arrow is
what was the question? I missed it.
the same concept plays into couch surfing through his new novel.
Yeah. Couch surfing through the 12 chambers of hell. Yeah. So it's about Nathan Farrow, who's kind of like this aging rock star who lost his family. And it's yeah, there's a strong musical element to that as well. It's not, I don't think it's as intrinsically into the DNA of the storytelling, but it's strong there. Um, and I guess that's something I go back to in a fair amount of stories. I have a story in The Envious Nothing called Orphan that has a lot of music elements to it. So it's something I go back to a lot.
Just as an aside, if folks go to your Alan just says Alan Smalling says I just read that a week or so ago. Very good. So
Oh, thank you.
I love this about live. Once we got past the technical parts, um, lost my train of thought. But I was going to say this though. I don't know how long we have Pete because I know he's working today, and I wanted Pete. Do you want to handle some questions for a bit before you have to go?
No,
No.
no, no. I don't have to go to 3:45. So just let the conversation evolve naturally.
Okay. Let
So
it.
don't.
I'm letting it evolve naturally to you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, geez.
No, I'm kidding.
So
I've got questions.
all right, go.
All right. Um, do you think that why you write horror, I would guess, comes from that anger you had as a child, and what's more your motivation today as an adult?
I think it probably started there for sure, but I've just always been attracted to dark art in general, whether it's fiction or horror movies or in music and paintings, Um, and I think that it allows you horror for me allows you to explore a lot of different ideas in a fantastical way that's just is appealing to me. I'm not I don't I get kind of bored by reality, so to speak.
Yeah,
Like I don't want to. One of the
Lovecraft
things
said
that
something like that, didn't he, Pete? Like, I'm so utterly bored with humanity. I'm not interested in a piece of fiction. Give me a murder on the page or something like that. Yeah, yeah,
so for me, I know that there's a lot of people who are really into like like police procedural stuff within their horror and stuff like that, and that's cool. But for me, like, I can't stand writing anything like that. Like, the
Right.
further I can get from reality when I write, the happier I am. So I think that supernatural horror just has drawn me in for that, and it allows you to explore the whole range of human emotion, in a very interesting way, I think. So
I found the quote.
okay, what is it?
He has stated that some of his projects, quote, tell me if this is a false quote or not, quote, drag their nails into the vaginal walls of creation, screaming to stay in the mental womb forever.
That sounds like a legit quote.
And if it's not, he'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good quote. Oh, man.
Where did I say that? That does sound familiar.
Looks like, hang on a second. I think it's on your website.
Is it? Okay.
Oh, yeah. 10
Yeah.
years to Mastema, posted on
okay.
February 10, 2015. Some
yeah,
projects
that's-
come easily. Others drag their nails into blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that comic took forever to come out.
So I think this is the problem with writers, right? We write so much, and we're expected to remember all of it. It's just,
I read an interesting anecdote about Einstein, about that, Pete, recently.
Yeah.
Someone asked him what the speed of light was, which it's burned in my mind. I love astronomy. And he goes, I think, no, it was the speed of sound. He goes, I don't know, I don't remember. I have that written down. I don't attempt to remember anything that I don't have written down. And if it's good enough for Einstein, it's probably good enough for us, right?
No, I had a physics and also a chemistry professor that basically said memorizing tables and formulas and constants is for morons.
That is not what genius or that's not where brains comes from. That's not where genius comes from. That you've memorized everything.
You can look all that stuff up. It's going to be right there at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And now it's even closer than our fingertips. It's like it's in my phone. Like,
yeah.
So
and there's better use of your brain power than memorizing all that stuff.
Right. Like having the entire chorus for Hotel California. That I need.
By the way, the speed of light is 186,284.4 thousand miles a second. And I did not have to look that up. It's been burning in my brain since I was like 6. Some things you can't get rid of. But yeah, I've got this, I'm using this note-taking app called Obsidian. And on this subject, I can't, it's free. I can't praise it highly enough. It's open source. And it's, if you just picture as your own private database where you can link to other notes that you've made. And so it builds this kind of beautiful web of your own thoughts and realizations and, essays and journals to yourself. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about, but I'm trying to get other people to try it because it's I love it.
Very cool.
Yeah. So do we want to stay on Weird House for a second, Pete?
Sure. What do you want to talk about?
Well,
Weird House.
I think Joe Morey must be one incredibly easy guy to work for because he's just such a nice guy. How did you become the editor there? How did that happen?
So I wrote Blackheart Boys. So this is kind of
if I was going to be an editor for a press, I would want it to be under a guy like Joe Morey.
Well, a million years ago, I wrote Black Pantheons, which was my first collection. I sent that to St. Joshi for a blurb. He said, you're not there yet, but you're like onto something. Send me more stuff. So I sent St. Blackheart Boys Choir. He loved it. He put me in touch with Joe Morey because he's like, Joe's starting up a new press. Why don't you talk to him? And Joe read it and he's like, I love this and it's completely unmarketable. Why don't you write me a Halloween collection?
I love it and it's unmarketable.
So I said, how about a Devil's Night collection? Like that hasn't been done. And so I did Devil's Night for him. And then we just, kind of developed a friendship from there. And he Joe's, I don't know, what is he, like 65, 66, something like that. He's not super tech savvy. So he was
No,
like,
he's
I
not.
need someone, I need someone to handle social media and stuff for me. Can you do that? So I started doing the social media, and then um, I just kind of kept doing more and more stuff for him. And we, he was doing, he wanted to do an anthology, a haunted house anthology. He asked me to co-edit it, and we did that together. 13 haunted
13 haunted
houses.
houses.
Yeah,
Well, let's
13 haunted houses.
yeah, let's stop there for a second and talk about
Mm,
let's talk about the Devil's Night and 13 haunted houses.
sure.
Are you from Detroit? Detroit, excuse me.
No, no,
I
I
mean, you don't
wrote that
have to
because,
be, but I'm just was curious.
yeah, everybody asked me that. And
I bet.
for me, it was the fact that when I saw The Crow as a kid, I thought Devil's Night was made up. I thought it was just a
I did
movie.
too well, I wasn't a kid, but I was like, "Oh, this is a real thing? What?"
So, like, I think I was reading the autobiography of one of the guys from like the Insane Clown Posse or something, and it talked about like this actually happening, and he like didn't know that it didn't happen outside of Detroit. He thought it happened everywhere. Um, so I read that, and I just kind of got obsessed with it after realizing it was a real thing. Um, and
Well,
yeah,
hang
when
on.
Joe
For those who
suggested
don't know, what is Devil's Night? For those who don't know.
so pretty much the night before Halloween, it doesn't really happen anymore, but back in like like the 70s through like the 90s or so, um, the people would just go out and they just light the whole city on fire.
Yeah.
um, and when I did a lot of research, I found out that a lot of it was actually just kind of like everyday, like, just like moms and dads, like burning down drug houses and stuff like that too. There was like the insurance stuff, but a lot of it was like people trying to like take their neighborhoods back from the gangs. And
Mm,
um, so there was a lot going on with it, but it's just a wild thought to me. Like it's like this purge night,
yeah. Uh, so it's a
And it,
collection.
Yes.
Okay.
They're all kind of intertwined. They all take place on the same Devil's Night in Detroit, 1987. And, some of the characters might appear in another story, or, the settings
Right.
or events might overlap a little bit.
Pete.
so very
And
trick or treat.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I,
that's
actually, when I was kind of developing the idea, I went back and I watched a bunch of like Trick or Treat and a bunch of those anthology kind of things that I've always liked that mosaic novel kind of style.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
I
wanted
do
to do
too.
something like that.
I haven't gotten to that one yet, Curtis, and I'm anxious to do so.
Well, I'll tell you, the Luke Spooner did the artwork for it, and Joe. So there was the special, the hardcover signed in number one or whatever, that sold out. But Joe did through one of the printers that he works with. He did a paperback with full color illustrations.
Wow.
And I think it's only like $20 on the Weird House site or something. It's pretty reasonable for like a full color paperback. But Luke Spooner did gorgeous artwork in it. I was really happy with how it came out.
I'm just writing down that I want to give out the Weird House URL is, yeah, it's just simply weirdhousepress.com, guys.
Yeah.
And you could not be supporting that. First of all, anything on Weird House I've always found to be a great read. And secondly, you're supporting a really great little press with a really nice guy running it. So,
And
uh,
for those who don't know, Joe's been in the small press forever.
yeah,
Like he started Dark Regions in the '80s before he gave it to his son, and he briefly had Dark Renaissance and now Weird House Press. So he knows how to make a really nice book.
yeah. I got a question from the audience. Victor says, I'm sorry, but what happens on Devil's Night? This is the first I've heard of that night or what happened on that night. Um, well, I didn't, you know what? I didn't hear about it before I watched The Crow.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
you love Red
yeah.
Rains down Creepypasta. Okay, go on. What?
So yeah, it does.
Yeah, be more specific about it.
The comic The Crow comes out about what 15 years before the movie. Um, it brings this whole Devil's Night to national prominence because honestly, the Crow comic book is just a massive hit. It stumbled to begin with because they had a problem with the publisher, but then once it gets settled with Caliber, it just takes off and just people are like in awe. And long before the movie comes out, there was a ton of Crow and James O'Barr merch just everywhere. It's that post. It's it's the it's that time period in comics history when the big two are suddenly losing ground and independent comics are making a huge splash.
What was this, around 1980? Early
80,
80s?
I would say 85, 86 to 92, maybe
Okay.
Is
that
that
range.
about the same time Poison Elves came out?
Poison Elves, The
Yeah.
Crow, Watchmen, the Sandman, um, Warlock 5, Grendel, Mage, uh, just Chernobyl Red, just a huge. What was it? The Baker Street, the punk rock version of Sherlock Holmes. Just a huge explosion of possibilities, and because of the popularity of the comic, suddenly Devil's Night becomes sort of known to everybody. And then you get the movie a few years later. And that just takes it to the national level.
Yeah.
And Devil's Night is the night before Halloween, where people with a criminal tendency tend to make the most of it.
Something
And
interesting, Pete. I
yeah,
think I've told you this before, but I grew up in Iowa, and trick or treat night in Iowa, or at least in Des Moines, where I lived, the capital city, is on October the 30th. It's not on October 31st. And I've
oh,
always wondered if this was a reaction to Devil's Night in Detroit. Some local, um, councilman or somebody thought we better fill this night with something else, or if it's that the parents wanted to go out and party on Halloween and not have to worry about trick-or-treaters, which I think probably the latter. But yeah, for years I thought, oh, everybody trick-or-treats on October the 30th.
I think Devil's Night, why it kind of took root in Detroit really has to do with, like the economic
Yeah,
realities of
yeah.
Detroit, and they had a really hard way to go.
Yeah. Did you see,
And
oh, I'm sorry, go on.
as I say, there was also like there was a lot of racial tension in Detroit. And people think about like white flight in Detroit and everything, but beyond that, because I did a lot of research for Devil's Night. So after like the riots in like like white flight happened, a lot of the people in the black community were like, all right, we're gonna own these businesses now. Like this is gonna be ours, and they didn't have the cash or the credit to buy these businesses. So a lot of Arab people moved in and they bought up these small businesses. So there was a lot of resentment from the black community against the Arab community. So you just had all these economic tensions, racial tensions. It was just it was just like a pressure pot, and it
I
just
can
blew over.
imagine. Ton of research for that one, huh?
Yeah.
Have you seen Only Lovers Left Alive?
No.
First of all, it's one of the best vampire films out there. But it also, the protagonist vampire, he lives in this burnt out part of Detroit where there's no electricity, and it's just amazing to me. And I'm watching this movie, and I know this is a real thing,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, and it's
Um,
it's incredible. It really drives it home. I mean, it's one thing to know this stuff, but then I see it in a movie like this movie, and I'm like, wow, you know,
8 Mile with Eminem there. They didn't the like mayor of Detroit didn't want that filmed in Detroit. Because he didn't want people to see how bad it was. And he kind of fought against the movie being filmed there, but lost.
which movie? Think.
8 Mile with Eminem.
Oh, yeah,
Like yeah, he didn't want the mayor of Detroit didn't want it being filmed there.
yeah.
So
But it needed to be.
It needed to be, yeah.
Yeah.
But the movie that also is relevant here is Barbarian,
Yes,
Oh
yeah,
God,
absolutely.
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Barbarian did a really good job of that because you have the flashback too when you had all the nice green lawns and perfect suburbia.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine, building that set neighborhood, and then having to destroy it,
Yeah.
so that it would look like it would look 40 years later. And just, um, it reminds me of the story. Remember, David Lynch's Dune?
Hmm.
So there's this scene in the beginning where they're on Caladan, and the lady, Jessica, comes down this beautiful carved staircase. It's intricately carved, floor to 20-foot ceiling staircase. The story goes is that they threw money, like, it's just a tiny little money, to Romanian carpenters, and they didn't know anything about set building.
All right.
So they just carved the staircase,
That's
and
wild.
it's a real staircase. And they shot like 30 seconds of film on it,
Yeah.
and then they were done. And they just left it behind and abandoned it. It's just like, it's a masterwork of art. And then it's just like, yeah, we're done with it. Bye.
Yeah.
Well,
Crazy stuff.
check out Only Lovers Left Alive when you get time. Let me
Absolutely.
know what you think of it. Victor wrote another comment. Curtis, I know you from Chilling Tales for Dark Nights and Drew Blood's podcast. I guess that doesn't ring a bell with me. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it's Drew Blood is this kind of narrator guy. He does these YouTube videos, and I think they're on Spotify and such too. And basically he'll narrate different short horror stories, and I think
Hmm.
he's done 3 of mine. And I got introduced to that podcast through a friend on Facebook um who does kind of like the tech stuff. And yeah, he does a really good job. It's real good production quality, and he has this gravelly voice. He's like got this like cowboy thing kind of going on.
Yeah,
um yeah, and he's done 3 of mine, and yeah, it's been good, and it's all reprints, so
yeah,
getting paid twice. So
yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
yeah,
So, uh,
he gets a ton of views too. That's the other thing. It gets your stories in front of a lot of people. Like it's
oh, I'm
like
sure.
thousands of views. Um, so
Yeah, and hopefully then they go check out more of your work.
yep.
So, 13 haunted houses, because you and I were going to chat about that a while
A while
back, and
back,
it
yeah.
didn't work out.
Yeah,
So
I was
let's give some time to that.
in I think before I was trying to get Ramsey Campbell on here to talk with it too, and
Yeah.
he's in England, so it's a little bit tough time wise. But yeah, this
Well,
was
I
the
mean, we don't have to do the 6 o'clock if we ever did something
yeah.
like that. We can do like something like now, because it's probably only 8:30 there right now. So,
Yeah. But yeah, this was Joe wanted to do an anthology of haunted house stories. He asked me to help edit it. So um Joe knows a lot of writers, but most of the writers he knows are been writing for a long time. He isn't as familiar with some of the younger writers, so he had me reach out to some people. He reached out to some people, and we got a good table of contents. Like we got a Ramsey Campbell story in here, James Chambers, Douglas Wynn, Sarah Reed, Emma Gibbon, Evans Light, Sarah Tantlinger, Tony Richards, Jason Parent. You have a Simon Clark story in here. Tim Curran, a really amazing Richard Gavin story. Phil Fracassi did a story. So it's a pretty good table of contents. I'm very happy with how the book came out, and I guess for me, the hardest part of doing this was really the rejection part. Like, there were some really
mhm,
good stories that we had to reject because they didn't quite fit the tone. They were haunted house stories, but they were more like sad than scary, things like that. And it was kind of overwhelming for me because I had never really sat in an editorial position before, and all of a sudden I've got a Ramsey Campbell story, a Philip Fracassi story. So it was very cool, but it was a little bit made me nervous. So
That's the other thing writers have to keep in mind is that just because you get a rejection doesn't mean the story's not a good story. It just doesn't quite fit
yeah,
a lot of the time.
actually, there was a story for this that somebody submitted that I absolutely loved, but it wasn't a scary story. These are supposed to be,
Yeah,
in the guidelines. We said we wanted it to be, actually like really scary, and it was definitely horror. It was dark, but it was sad. It wasn't scary, but it was beautiful. So
yeah,
Well, I've had that same problem with, when I was editing the Chromatic Court. All the stories that I wanted, one of them was a fantasy story, and all the other ones were dark horror.
yep,
And as much as I tried to, and this fantasy story was on point, it did great things with the genre. I just could not get it into the flow of the rest of the anthology. I just couldn't make it work. It was so different that I couldn't make it fit.
yeah.
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 I was talking to Joe because he's helping his son get some things going with Dark Regions. He's helping Chris out with a few things over there, and there's an anthology he was helping him with, and it was a similar thing. It was like all these stories were set in a specific time period, and then somebody sent in this other one that was like it was still within the theme, but it was kind of like in a fantasy world. And he said it was an incredible story, but it just it doesn't fit with everything else. So.
Right. Um, for those who are, you know, listening who are huge cosmic horror fans, maybe they could start with The Envious Nothing. Would you agree?
Yeah, The Envious Nothing is I think a very strong work of mine for my short fiction. It's definitely all cosmic horror. Um, and I'm very proud of that. I I really enjoyed putting that collection together, and there's a few stories in there that I think are some of my best pieces of writing. So,
All right, so yeah, guys, start with that one if you want. How about the Coffin Maker's Book of Dark Tales?
so
Talk about that one.
that one was kind of interesting because this is a Joe Mori like suggestion.
Right.
So Joshua Rex, who co-wrote it with me. So there's 6 stories by me, 6 stories by Josh, and he had a collection through Weird House called The Descents. And one of the stories in there mentions a book called The Coffin Maker's Book of Dark Tales. And Joe loved the title, so he said, "You guys should write The Coffin Maker's Book of Dark Tales." And so we said, "Okay." And uh,
The
so
Black
Josh and
Guide.
I Josh and I kind of we brainstormed with Joe, and we decided to come up with kind of a almost like a crypt keeper type of character to introduce each story, which is the coffin maker, this guy right
Yeah,
here.
that's cool.
And originally we were going to do all the introductions as in more of a comic book style, but as we wrote the stories, um, they just weren't that kind of vibe. They were a little bit more serious. So we asked Luke Spooner to do this. I don't know if you can kind of see, but there's introductory text kind of written within the page.
Yeah, that you sent me this, and that is just so cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. So there's not really a theme to it per se. They're just kind of all horror stories. There is in here another Devil's Night story that is not in Devil's Night. I wrote another Devil's
Oh,
Night story, which is in here.
good to know.
And then the Black Book of Nothings is probably the most cosmic horror piece I have in here. One of my favorite stories, though, is Josh has a story called The Negative, which is a really creepy kind of mirror horror story. Very effective. And I think Josh is a fantastic writer, and he's like one of my favorite people. So
What else has he written? I'm not familiar with
um,
him. I should be, but I'm not.
he wrote a book for Weird House called The Inamorta, which is kind of I'm going to say it's Victorian because I don't know the actual term, and he's going to get offended by it because he's a historian by trade. But it's like around Victorian, and it's a kind of like a cursed violin or viola story. And he self-published a book of American Victorian ghost stories recently. Um, but yeah, by trade he's a historian, and he's just he has, when he writes, particularly when he writes with architecture in it, like he's so good at bringing the history and the architecture of things to life and not making it dry. It becomes really interesting and very very visual and real. Um, and yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out Josh's work for anybody who hasn't. I don't think he's as read as he deserves to be. So
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I do this show, is because there are so many wonderful writers out there that are not as read as they should be.
Like
And
I
he did
gotta,
have a letter in
yeah, Pete,
McSweeney's.
Mike, I gotta
go back to work.
I gotta go do a dad thing.
Okay.
So I will talk to you later. And
Thanks for being here,
Kurt,
Pete.
Nice to see you, Pete. Have a good one.
See you, buddy. I'm sorry, what did you say?
I was saying he had a letter in the horror issue of McSweeney's. I know that was
Mm.
so that was cool for him. But
Well, I suppose people can find him if they just Google Joshua Rex, I
yep,
suppose.
absolutely.
Okay. So remember that, guys. Um, what about
Oh, real quick, I don't think
yeah,
you
go
know
ahead.
about this. I want to bring it up before I forget.
Yeah, please.
So a while back, William Holloway did this
Oh, William,
anthology.
yeah.
Yep,
I know
he
him.
did this novella anthology called The Abyssal Plane for Journalstone.
Yeah.
Yep. So, it's this apocalyptic, like kind of his specific version or vision of a
Yeah.
Lovecraftian apocalypse.
Like roughly
And
10 years ago, something like that.
it might be that long.
Yeah.
Like time is meaningless to me.
I hear
um,
you.
but he had asked me several years ago to write something for the sequel to that, and it was kind of in limbo forever. But I wrote a novella for it maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and that's coming out this summer finally. So a sequel to the Abyssal Plane called Black Seas of Infinity, and it's
Good title.
me, Gemma Files,
Oh,
Brett Talley, and I think William ended up writing the last story.
Gemma,
I
huh?
th-
That's great.
yeah, John Langan was supposed to be in it, but it didn't pan out. Um, so, but yeah, it's so that's coming out finally. I think just in time for Necronomicon. So
You gonna be at Necronomicon?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I live
good.
like 15 minutes away. So
Oh, well then, yeah. Come find me. I'll be there.
absolutely.
Um, for those who are Patreons, just as an aside, we're gonna do a Patreon dinner as always. So that's always a lot of fun. Dinner with just the patrons. What was I gonna ask you? Oh, is there a pre-order link for that yet?
Not yet. No, there's not a pre-order yet.
Okay.
So
Well, I do mean it. Let me know when your books come up for pre-order or order, and
oh,
I'll make sure to post about them.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Sure. That's one of the things I'm trying to do with this podcast, as I said, is boost the signal, as they say.
Yeah.
What about 13 Possessions?
So 13 Possessions
I
is
know I
all
haven't read that,
edited.
and I'm
It's
curious
not
about it.
out yet.
Oh, it's not out yet. No. Well, I
No,
was right. I haven't read it.
it's all edited. We get the cover designed and everything. I think right now Joe's trying to figure out the logistics of signature sheets across different countries, and
Yeah,
if that's
tell me about
feasible
it.
or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a. I think it's even better than 13 Haunted Houses. It- Once again, we have a phenomenal lineup in there. I don't have it in front of me, but there's a really great story by Brian Evanson. One of my favorite stories in there is by Krista Carmen, who I like Krista a lot. She's a good friend of mine, and she just got to deal with Simon and Mercer, so she's
Yeah.
seeing great things. Um, but yeah, it's a very cool. Just once again, we wanted it to be scary. It wasn't supposed to be, you know,
So it's a bit
Joe
of a
wanted to,
sequel to 13
yeah,
Haunted Houses.
spiritual successor, whatnot. And we have most of the stories. I don't know that Joe sent out official acceptances or not, but we have another one called 13 Dark Dimensions, which we'll be doing after that, which we have most of the stories for as well. So we're hoping to keep this kind of 13 themed anthology thing going.
Okay. Like I said, keep me posted on that. Something I like to ask writers and creators, or any type of creator, is what makes you feel like you're successful? What has to happen before you feel like, yeah, I'm successful? Like for some people, it's almost unattainable. They got to be Stephen King, you know, or make a ton of money. For others, uh, like me, one of the things that makes me feel successful is, I would say, one of the things besides my family is being able to get up every day and do something that I love and still be able to pay the bills. I don't really.
That's huge.
It is huge,
Yeah.
but some people that's not what they're looking for. That's not what makes them feel successful, and that's fine. I was curious about you, so
It kind of has changed over the years. When I initially started writing, I was young, and I think everybody, when they write that first book, they're like, "Oh, everybody's gonna buy this, and I'm gonna be rich," like,
right, right.
which is not the reality for most of us. So I guess for me, at this point, it's gotten to, um, I don't really like the idea of chasing commercial success at the cost of the art. It's really, I want to make sure that I'm telling the story I want to tell. I'm enjoying what I'm writing, and success to me is really how that connects with other people. And even if it's, I don't know, I get 5 reviews on Goodreads. If this is really resonated with someone, and they were able to get something from it, even if it's not what I intended them to get, for me that's success. Because um, this, ultimately, I'm not trying to. I mean, I'd love to make all my money from this, but that's not necessarily the goal. It's really about just creating art and kind of putting out the most honest expression of myself that hopefully other people can get something out of.
I think you and I are very, very much on the same page with that. Uh, on our podcast on Sunday, John was on. John Langan, and that came up, and because I like to ask that question. Um, Sam Rebeline was the guy we were interviewing. And I asked him that, and John commented on it too, and he talked about something like what you just said about touching the lives of other people in a positive or helpful way.
Yeah.
Um, he said that the fisherman really resonated with a reader who I guess emailed him or contacted him somehow and said that he was reading um, it and his wife died. And I don't know if you've gotten to The Fisherman yet. It's a great,
Oh,
great.
Fisherman is one of my. I think it's probably
Oh
my
yeah.
favorite horror book written in the 21st century.
Oh well, then you've gotten to
Yeah.
it. It's a great book, and it just came. It just keeps chugging along too. It's not a new
Yeah.
release, but it keeps chugging along, and rightfully so. But he said the book helped him so much to get through that.
That's amazing. Like
Yeah,
it's so rewarding.
yeah. I had a guy email me last week and said that I literally, me and the podcast literally saved his life, and went on to tell me the story about that. And it was just like, wow. I showed it to my wife, and she's like, that's what it's all about,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
So she's a teacher, and so she obviously touches lives every day in a positive way. Um, all right. Anything else that you want to talk about that maybe I don't know to ask or haven't thought of to ask?
Um, so there's another project I worked on, which I don't know when it's coming out, but there was a there's a there was a Kickstarter maybe a year ago, a little over, for this tabletop RPG called Astro Inferno, and I did some of the writing on that, and that was a lot of fun because I've been a tabletop nerd like since I was like 12 years old. So that was kind of a bucket list project to be able to do.
Yeah,
And yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I don't know when it's actually going to release, but the Kickstarter was very successful. I think it did over like 150,000 euros or something. Um, and it's this kind of, the setting's kind of hard to explain. He calls it like post hell, and
Okay.
basically the physical universe has ceased to exist, and Satan is like disappeared from hell, and all the kind of mythological realms are kind of mashed together. And but some of the the human beings from the physical world didn't die and still ended up there. So you have like astronauts and like demons and like it's really weird. And
No,
the
but
game
that's a
mechanics.
really interesting premise.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it was a really interesting premise. And um I was able to, he just wanted me originally to do some flavor text here and there, and then I ended up writing some of the stuff for different, I guess, realms or settings, and I got to write a whole thing about Carcosa in there, and that was pretty cool.
Well, yeah. Have you played Cthulhu Wars, by the way? That's the big one.
I haven't, no.
Oh man,
Mhm.
they sent me Cthulhu Wars, and I'm not much of a gamer, but for the figurines or whatever you want to call them alone, it's just amazing.
Is it?
Yeah,
I'll have to check it out.
yeah.
Uh,
So, what is it about RPG that you love that excites you?
Um, I don't know. I don't know if it's that kind of like fantastical escape thing or whatnot. Going back to that, I think when I was a kid, it was just a way to, I could go somewhere and escape the world and not have to hear my parents yelling or
Oh, got it.
whatever.
I'm
Um,
sorry you grew up that way, man.
well,
That's
Thank you.
hard.
Yeah, it was tough, and but they grew and became better people. So,
Oh, I'm glad to hear
um,
that.
yeah. So, um,
Do you have a close relationship with them today, or no?
well, my dad died. My dad died 14 years ago, something like that. So he had um he had moved back to Ohio, was taking care of his parents. His parents ended up dying, and then he started drinking again, and his liver went. Um, and that I mean, obviously it sucks because he was my dad, but my son was like a baby at that point. Like he had never met my son, so that was kind of rough.
Yeah,
But my mom, yeah, I still I have a relationship with my mom, and she lives fairly close by, so
that's good.
yeah.
That's good.
But yeah, I think that was the thing. It was just RPGs were kind of an escape for me, and I think that it kindled my love for storytelling, because that's really where I started learning how to tell stories, was by running like D&D games and stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, it's all storytelling, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah. And that's how we grew up as humans.
yeah,
Sitting
absolutely.
around the fire
Mhm.
and at night and entertaining ourselves. You know, there was no Wi-Fi back then, or at least that's what
No,
I've heard. This old joke about what did people do before television, and the comic was a comic panel, and the next panel is a guy sitting in his chair just staring at the wall. You know.
yeah,
So, but yeah, we're a storytelling species. That's why it's so important to us to hear stories and to tell stories.
absolutely. It's how we process the world, and at least for a lot of us.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, no problem. Guys, remember, Curtis's website is Curtis M, as in Mike, curtismlawson.com. And he's got links to his books and so forth. Everything is there. So if you bookmark that URL, then you're gonna stay in the loop. Are you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I have like an author page. I don't really use it much. People can just send me a friend request on my personal page.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
So
and then
Facebook, Twitter. You say Twitter? Yeah, you did.
yeah, Twitter. I have a
Facebook,
TikTok that
Twitter,
I
and
don't really know
Instagram.
how to use.
I don't know. Yeah. First of all, I think it's gonna get banned.
Yeah,
But secondly, I get so many views on TikTok, but and that's great, but it's meaningless
it doesn't
because
translate.
it doesn't it doesn't translate over here to YouTube where I really need people to be.
Yeah,
You know, I don't know. I've
I'm
stopped
sure there's a
making.
way to take advantage of it, but I don't know how to.
Yeah, Logan and I were talking. My son Logan and I were talking about this last night at dinner about a lot of YouTubers will they'll do the whole thing. Yeah, remember to like and and comment and ring that bell and everything. I'm like, I
Mhm.
just can't do that. I'll remind, it's just not me. I remind people, please comment if you can. That helps the algorithm, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's gonna happen with TikTok, but so guys, if you wanna help me, there's the Patreon. I have all of these links in the show notes here. And if you don't like Patreon, there's Ko-Fi. And if you want to stay in the loop for free on the podcast and what's coming up and everything, there's I've got a Facebook Messenger just devoted to that, and the link is in the comments as well, and a link to the eZine calendar and all that stuff. So there's a bunch of links in the comments. Check them out, and my social media. Oh, and by the way, like and ring that bell. And no,
Smash that subscribe button.
it's so annoying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's just like, let's fast forward past this part, which is what I usually do. So if I was a real YouTuber, all of this would be on the screen right now, but I am what I am, I guess. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And your upcoming book again is?
Well, I just put out Couch Surfing through Couch Surfing through the 12 Chambers of Hell. Just came out through Weird House Press. I think there's like 5 deluxe editions left on the website. It's also on ebook and paperback on Amazon. And then in August, supposedly, Black Seas of Infinity is coming out, in which I have a Lovecraftian novella in there.
But if they go to your website and check it out periodically or on
Yeah, it'll
social
be
media,
updated on there.
you'll stay in the loop. They'll stay in the loop.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. And
Have a good one, Mike.
yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
You
So,
too.
folks, thanks for watching and goodbye and hello as always. So.